This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, welcome to The Clash, where we take a Christian worldview and allow it to clash into the culture around us. When we're said and done, we're going to educate, we're going to entertain, but we're also going to give you an opportunity to think just a little bit and maybe just strengthen your walk with Jesus. I'm Jeff Dixon. I'm one of the hosts of The Clash, and I'm joined by the one and only Saint, Chris Whaley. Chris, how you doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing great, Jeff, and just excited about. I know I say that a lot, but I'm very excited today.
I am too.
We're going to be interviewing an award-winning movie director by the name of Rick Pamplin. His, I guess, most well-known movie was Burt Reynolds' The Last Interview.
Yeah, I mean, and what you're going to hear is the story of a man's quest that puts him in position to get this last interview. Mm-hmm. And it is a powerful, transformational story.
Absolutely. Well, I've got to get to Burt Reynolds.
Oh, good.
Yeah. That's really what intrigued me to get to know you was Burt Reynolds, because I've shared this. My pastor in West Palm Beach was Burt Reynolds' pastor, and of course you've met Pat and Amy, and Pat did Burt's funeral, and also the movie Burt Reynolds' The Last Interview has just been amazing.
There it is.
Yeah, it's been amazing. So, can you tell us about how that came about, and let us know what happened with Burt Reynolds?
Well, it's a lot spiritual. When I was a kid and I used to read about patience, I was like, I can't be patient. I got to get out of Michigan. I got to get to Hollywood. I was very impatient. And I didn't understand that part of scripture, that you have to turn things over to God and trust it. So Burt Reynolds was my favorite actor and movie star as a kid. I just loved Burt Reynolds. And I was obsessed with getting to Burt Reynolds. So one of the first things I did when I went to Hollywood was I kept saying, Burt Reynolds, how do I get to Burt Reynolds? Well, he's the #1 box office star in the world. He doesn't want to talk to you. Well, who are you? So I tried to interview him. He didn't like to do interviews. I was working, with some magazines and things and different things, and he was going through a period of, when you're that famous and successful, there would be a flash of him here. I'd talk to somebody here. I'd talk to somebody there. And so I pursued Burt and never could get to first base. So I met a guy who wanted to write a movie about Spade Cooley, the country western singer who ended up beating his wife to death, was Roy Rogers' best friend, and went to jail, got out of jail, did a benefit performance, went backstage, put his head down and died. And it was a fascinating story of redemption and forgiveness. And we wrote this 300-page script called Shame, which is based on Spade Cooley's hit songs. And I was convinced this was for Burt and Sally Field, because there was this great woman who was the manager, who we got the rights from, who was way ahead of her time and took care of this guy and never forsaked him. And they had no romance, but she was just amazing. Her name was Bobby Bennett. She was this great woman. And I just went, if I can get to Burt Reynolds, he's going to win an Oscar, because Spade Cooley was a half-breed Indian. He was what they would call an, boot kicker guy. And he was like a rough guy. And, Burt had just done like WW and the Dixie Kings or what. I mean, Burt could have done anything at that time and people would have come to see it. And I thought, I know I saw him once on Merv Griffin talking about how he really wanted to win an Oscar. And I was convinced this is it. So I had a literary agent at the time, Mike Hamelberg, And we were able to set up meetings with people that allegedly, supposedly represented Burt. And so we went out to Venice to Bobby Bennett's house. She was dying of cancer. And she was good friends with Jock Mahoney, who was a stepfather to Sally Field. So I wrote it for Sally and Burt. Everybody loved the script. Everybody. So Ray Stark, who used to be a big producer, he did Hello Dolly, Funny Lady, all this kind of stuff. And he had offices, Ray Stark Productions, and he was doing a movie called Annie. And so I got a call one day from a guy named Norm Gann, who was an associate producer on Annie. And he said, Burt's having dinner in New York with Ray Stark tomorrow night. Great. No, you have to stay up all night, and we need a 10-page treatment with pictures, and it needs to be delivered in the morning on the pouch that comes from Columbia every day to New Jersey, where we're shooting Annie, to give it to Ray to look at and give it to Burt. I need 2 copies. And the whole movie rides on this. And I was like, okay. So I stayed up all night. I did this thing. I went to a print shop. I got it done. I drove out to Columbia. I was living at the beach. I did this whole thing. And I wrote this treatment that Burt was going to see the treatment. And then if Burt liked it, Burt was going to do the movie. It was going to be a big Columbia Studios, you know, with music and country western and all this. So this is pretty exciting stuff. So we don't hear and we don't hear. And I get a call from my mother, who's retired now, living in Florida. And she says, I have bad news. I said, what? She said, Burt Reynolds and Sally Field aren't going to do your movie. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I just got my new copy of the National Enquirer and they broke up. I said, Mom, you can't believe the National Enquirer. I'm right out here. I'm talking to Burt's people. What are you talking about? So we go to this big meeting at Columbia Studios. And there's this guy from William Morris, and there's a guy from wherever, CA, wherever all these places are. And there's people from Columbia and Ray Stark. And we go to this big meeting. And they go, Burt and Sally aren't going to do the movie. They broke up. It's like, oh, okay. I said, now what? And then they started trying to come up with people, and there was nobody that could play the part. We wrote it for Burt. We wrote it for Sally. So I got that close. So now, years later, I'm in Las Vegas doing Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. And there's a guy, Joey Villa, who was a stand-up comedian, who was a protege of Jerry Lewis, who was doing a show called The Splash Show. But he needs jokes. And he says to me, I would like to hire you to write some stuff. I've seen some of the stuff you did with the girls. The girls all love you, say you're funny. He said, I said, well, I'm not a joke writer. He goes, I'll pay you $100 a joke. I'm in. All right, let's go. So we would go and get an ice cream cone and a newspaper. And he had a 450 SL Mercedes, chocolate brown with camel interior. And we would drive out into the desert, out Henderson, out by the Air Force thing, the middle of nowhere. And I would read the newspaper. And I would come up with some funny variation on a joke. And he would literally throw a $100 bill, and I would try to stay in the car and grab the $100 bill. Every time I made him laugh, he threw me a $100 bill. And then I saw the Splash Show, I think 42 times. I had the corner booth, and I would sit there and make notes, and this worked or this didn't or whatever. So this was my side job while I was doing Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. And Joey was a great guy and always paid me. And the Splash Show, by the way, became the #1 show in Las Vegas. It was a huge show. And he was the MC, and he'd come out and he'd do. And just as an example of how stupid these jokes were, I said, oh, did you hear about the new combination birth control designer item of clothing? It's a pair of blue jeans. It's called Sergio Prevente. I mean, it's the stupidest jokes ever. I mean, they're just stupid. And I got $100 a joke, which I went and put in my little lockbox to take back to Los Angeles. So one day Joey said, do you like Burt Reynolds? I go, what do you mean I like Burt? I love Burt Reynolds. He goes, I just got cast in his new movie. He's making a movie called Heat that he's starring in, and I'm in it. And he goes, you want to meet Burt? I go, Joey, I'll do anything to meet Burt. he said, well, I don't, I'm exhausted from the show. Will you run lines with me? Will you drive me there? Will you go on the set as my assistant? And I'll make sure you get to meet Burt. I'm thinking, this is it. This is my break. Thank you, Lord. It paid off. So I'm all excited. We drive up, police cars, ambulances, TV news reporters, ropes. I'm like, I guess this is a Burt Reynolds movie. This is what it's like when you get there. So we drive up. Joey says, I'm Joey Bell. I'm in the cast, blah, 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 blah. And as we're walking in, this guy's coming out on a stretcher. And he's like, oh, he's holding his face. And he's like, and I'm like, what's going on? And they go, that's the director. I said, well, what happened? He said, Burt hit him. I said, what? He said, yeah. I said, well, are they going to still make the movie? He said, I don't know. So Joey says, come on, let's go upstairs. So we go up and there's this big set and everything. There's like, Panavision cameras and 100 people and just total chaos. And I can kind of see Burt. And Joey says, come on, you want to meet Burt? I said, not now. We're not the Burt. Are you crazy? The cops are interviewing him. They're going to arrest him for assault and battery. I'm not going to be part of this memory. And so I went and stood with my back as far against the wall behind one of the Panavision cameras as I could to stay out of Burt's sight line. So it turned out they didn't arrest Burt, and Burt was now the director of the movie. So anyway, I missed that opportunity because I just didn't feel that was the right moment, to meet Burt. So he did come to a show, but I couldn't walk off the show to talk to him or whatever. But Willie Nelson came, Burt came, all these celebrities came, to see the girls and see Gorgeous Ladies Wrestling. So, all these opportunities kept slipping through my fingers. So I go through a really rough period in my life. I was at Universal Studios. I'm down on my luck. Things aren't going well. And I end up relocating to South Florida. And I'm literally have one foot in a homeless shelter. No one will hire me. I had gotten 3 lawsuits, came out against one woman, an elderly investor, sued me. And she was malicious. And I never got mad at her. I never countersued her. I prayed for her. I had gone to church with her. I had had dinner in her house. I thought we were friends. So for 5 years, I had to fight these 3 lawsuits. And took every penny of my money. But if I would have given in and just declared bankruptcy, all my investors would have lost money in those 3 films. And I couldn't betray the investors. Yeah. So my wedding ring went away. My jewelry went away. My artwork went away. My furniture went away. And my lovely wife, Maggie, stood by me. And for 3 years, we fought. And 5 years, 3 lawsuits, 5 years. And then we won. We won all 3 lawsuits. They audited us, our CPAs, everything. They went over everything. They made all kinds of false accusations. And I remember everybody kept saying, oh, this woman's rich. You got to countersue her. I don't want to sue people. I pray for this woman. And until the day she died about a year or so ago, I thought she would call me and ask for forgiveness and I would give it. She never did. It's a funny thing when people speak ill of you or sue you or smear you, you find out who your real friends are. Mm-hmm. And we ended up with about 4 real friends. And one of them was this guy named Scott DuPont. And Scott and I worked on a bunch of films together. I'd been at Universal Studios from 94 to 2008 and had a great friendship. Scott called me up and said, congratulations, you won these suits. What are you doing? I said, I'm actually trying to find a homeless shelter to move into. I have no money. And Scott said, well, I'll raise money. I'll make a movie with you. And I was like, okay. So I knew this woman who'd written a book, and I asked her to go to lunch at Duffy's, which I didn't have the money to pay for. And I started talking to her and I said, Louise, I'd like to make a movie out of your book, blah, 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 blah. And she goes, okay, fine. She goes, you're the only person I trust in the movie business. So she gave me the rights. We did this movie called Movie Money Confidential. So it was about helping independent filmmakers find money to make films and tell their stories. So we started making the film. Scott raised the money. And I said, I got to go after Burt Reynolds. Burt had a school here, and he had a museum, believe it or not. And I went to several events to meet him, and he never showed up or whatever. And the rumors were that he was very ill and dying. So Scott and everybody else said, what does Burt Reynolds have to do with raising money? I said, I don't know. We'll find out. So we pursued him for, I believe, 6 months. We want to talk to Burt. We talked to the film commissioner. We talked to this guy. Anybody knew Burt? I'll do any. I'll talk a bit of it. I had met Burt. I had a fundraiser named Ken Hickman, and he took my wife and I to dinner at a restaurant. What's it called, Maggie?
The Jetty.
The Jetty in Jupiter. And Burt ate dinner there every night. He was friends with the owner, Jim Truby, and it was right on the Intercoastal, right across from the White House. And on my birthday, they surprised me and they sat me next to Burt. And he could barely walk, and he made these little baby steps, and he was very frail, but he wished me happy birthday, and he came by the table, and it was wonderful. But I knew it wasn't a time to pitch him a movie or talk to him. So I told Scott this story, and we persisted. And Scott was going to fly back. He lives in Los Angeles, and he was going to fly back on a Friday, and we filmed for 5 weeks. And on the Monday of the last week, we got a phone call. Burt Reynolds will do an interview, because they told him for 6 months he hates documentaries. He doesn't like being interviewed. He has no interest in them. But it had to be at Burt's school. And he wanted to film it in front of his class. And I was like, whatever he wants, fine, we'll do it. In typical director style, they said, well, you can show up 15 minutes early. I said, no. I'm not showing up 15 minutes early to light Burt Reynolds in a strange location I've never been in with 3 cameras. No. Well, you can have half an hour. No. Well, you're going to open the school early so I can come. No, we're not going to do any of that. I said, we're going to film this thing the way I want and make Burt look right and make Burt comfortable, or I'm not doing it. And everybody's going, what are you doing? What are you doing? So they opened the school an hour early, and we go in, and they've got this thing that looks like a garbage bag. It says Burt Reynolds School. It's terrible. And it was all terrible and awful. And Maggie, my producing partner, my wife, is also my production designer. And she makes people in situations look great. And we agree on what we want artistically. So she starts tearing down Burt's sign and moving this picture. And they're like, this is Burt Reynolds stuff. You can't touch this. And they said, oh, Burt's going to throw you out on your ear. You can't touch his stuff. So we rearranged it, and we put up this picture of Burt on a horse, this oil painting, and Maggie art directed it. And we got it just right. And they said, Burt's here. Scott went out, and he walked in holding Scott's arm. And I'm sitting there with the headphones and the wired up and everything. And we got 3 cameras and the lights, and his students are all there. And Burt looks around. And he goes, I like what you've done with the place. It looks good. So he came and he sat down, and he looked at me and he goes, who do I have to talk to? And I said, me. And he goes, really? I said, yeah, me. Which, he was in a bad mood. He'd been sick. And I thought the interview was supposed to be like 10 minutes long. So we started talking, and an hour and 15 minutes later, we ended the interview. We talked about God. We talked about his father. We talked about everything. We talked about Spade Cooley Project, everything. And I asked him in the beginning a couple of questions about funding films, which is what our movie was about. He goes, I don't have any interest in that. I have nothing to say. So I thought, here I am, spent almost 50 years of my life chasing this guy. I've got 3 cameras and microphones. I'm just going to talk to him. I don't care. If it gets in the movie, I don't care. It's Burt Reynolds. Who cares? And when I was a kid, one of my favorite books was The Catcher in the Rye. And there's that scene where all the kids get up in like elementary school and they do book reports. And J.D. Salinger writes in the voice of Holden Caulfield, teachers don't understand that sometimes the most interesting stories aren't in the books. They're the stories that the kids tell. And the teachers always cut the kids off of telling their personal story. And I thought, I'm in Catcher in the Rye, and I'm Holden Caulfield, and I finally caught Burt, and I have 3 cameras and a crew and an audience, and I'm going to talk to Burt Reynolds. And I just went wherever Burt wanted.
Yeah.
And I later found out, thank you to your efforts, Pastor Chris, that Burt had given his life over to Christ at his birthday, which he had just had, his 82nd birthday. Mm-hmm. And I could see he wore a blue sweater. He was wearing a gold cross. And he was different than any interview I'd ever seen, because I went on YouTube and I watched every Burt Reynolds interview I could find. And it's Burt Reynolds, but he was vulnerable and he was warm and he was open and he was honest. And a lot of people felt, he knew he was dying. That, and he, even though it started off a little rough, we really got into some stuff. And he talked about his dad. He talked about different things that interested him. And I let him go. And some critics have viciously attacked me. Oh, he should have asked him about this and asked him about this. And I wasn't interested in the tabloids. I was interested in the man, Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
And what his talent was, what his relationship to God was, what he wanted to wisdom to give young people, what people getting in the business should know. And it was absolutely electrifying.
Yeah.
At the end of the interview, Burt does this. Come here. So I'm like, okay, I'm kind of clumsy and I've got the mic and the headband. And he comes over and he says, come here. And he bends over. And he says, I can't walk. Can you help lift me up and walk me? That chair over there is where I teach from. Yes, sir, Mr. Reynolds, I can do that. And he said, and I stood him up and he hugged me. And he said, kid, I think I was in my late 60s at the time. Kid, let's make some movies together. And he said, write me a script where I don't have to walk, and I'll do it. I said, Mr. Reynolds, it'd be an honor of my life to do that. So then my wife, Maggie, was there. And I said, Maggie, come here. This is Burt. This is my wife, Maggie. And then he put his arm around Maggie, and we walked over, and we sat down. And I had made all of my crew, and Chris has worked with my crew. He knows how good they are. They're good guys. I found these kids and trained them. And I said, no eye contact with Burt, no autographs, no pictures, no, just respecting. Let's get it in the can. So Burt says to me, don't you want a picture with me? And I said, only if the crew can all be in it. And he said, get them over here. So they took a picture of the crew on the iPhone of his manager, Todd. And it was unbelievable. So I went home and I came up with a great idea for a movie where Burt would play a cop. In the opening scene, he gets shot in the back and he's paralyzed, but they've got to figure out who shot him. He's a detective. And so he goes home and he's in a wheelchair, but he starts playing with the computer that he doesn't know anything about. And he starts going through videotape. And he realizes the person who shot him was his partner, that the killer, the serial killer they were investigating, was his partner. So Burt called and he wanted to see the film. And we were like, well, we're editing it. It takes a little time. And he loved the idea for the movie. He loved it. And that's going to make a Burt Reynolds movie. So he called up and he said that Quentin Tarantino was doing a movie and that he was going to go out there, Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, and these guys were all in it. And Burt was going to do a table read and he'd be back. And he gave me 2 dates, a Saturday and a Sunday. And he said, can you set up a screening? I said, yes, sir, I can. So I got a screening room at the Ritz-Carlton in Singer Island, and I reserved it for both days. so whenever Burt could make it. And then I got some VIPs and investors and different people. It's a small screening room, about 35 seats. And I was at my computer writing the script for Burt when I got the call that he died. 6 days before our screening.
Oh. Wow.
That's true.
But he changed my life. The movie changed my life. He talks to me. I dream about him. And I've since heard from friends like your friend, Chris Patrick, and other people about what was going on with Burt, what it meant. Todd drove him back, who lived with him at the time, and it was with him the day that he died. And Burt said, "What did you think of that interview?" And he said, "Well, I liked it." Burt said, "I've never given an interview like that." He said, "Right." He said, "But I really like that kid. I'm 68, I'm a kid." And he says, he said, "I really love Johnny Carson and of course, Dinah Shore, but this is one of my top 3 interview favorites."
Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Well, Rick, you know, we could go on and on and on, but it's a 30-minute show.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No.
And man, we just can't thank you enough for your time. I mean, I'm hanging on every word you say.
I am too.
And
And Rick, I want to have you back when the movie and the project that you worked in and invited Chris to be a part of comes out. We would love to kind of be a part of that as it's getting ready to be released and stuff like that, to ramp up to it. If you've got the time to do it, we would love that. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
And let me just say one word in closing about the picture I did with Chris.
Sure.
All my life, I wanted to make a movie about Jesus. And when the Burt movie was successful, and it's been hugely successful, it opened up the door. Scott DuPont called me and he said, "We have a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, critics and audiences. People love this movie. It's worldwide." I said, "I know. I get 100 emails a day." And he said, "Rick, we may never be here again, but you could make any movie you want and I'll fund it. I'll get you the money." I said, "I want to make my Jesus movie." And that movie means everything to me. But Burt helped me get it made.
Yeah.
Even though we weren't able to make the picture we were working on together, God put Burt Reynolds in my path at that moment to make the movie about Jesus that Chris is involved in.
Wow.
And it's changed my life. And I will forever honor Burt for his graciousness and his generosity and everything that he did for me personally.
Sure.
And I spent my whole life. So people who are listening to this, if your ship hasn't come in, keep banging your drum, keep persisting, trust in God, have patience, but do not lose sight of what you're trying to do. So
awesome.
I can't wait to come back, give you shorter answers, let you ask more questions.
Well, we're excited to have you back. I mean, you know what? That is a fascinating story. And I think to really understand that story, we actually need to go back and hear how he got to that point.
That's exactly right.
And so, Rick, we're going to see if we can keep him around and do another interview, right?
Right. So you need to tune in next time so you can hear how he got there. So have a great week and don't tap out.